Good talent never has a dearth of opportunities.
It makes life worth living, right? We went to Miami and spent 400 grand in 3 days. They were doing things guerrilla old school style. It's almost imposter syndrome for someone like myself. We dropped out of Stanford to do this and now we're billionaires.
And his manager said, I just want you to stand here from 9 to 5.
You either have a fire in your belly or you don't. So just like your algorithm is a reflection of what your interests are and your deep-seated fears or desires, look within if you're having a bad experience and maybe create better for others around you because it's a reflection of you.
You know you're failing yourself, and before you know it, you're far too deep into that. The social appetite or desire to go out and meet new people. That people need to be more intentional and just be more open.
So be good people. Be good helpers. Just enjoy the experience. Appreciate what's occurring in the moment. I guess it'll have to do.
Yeah, that's perfect. Are you in the Dallas Meetup office right now?
I am. I am.
How
Yeah,
long have
it's
you had
a
the office?
interesting question. We one of the guys that I had recruited way back in the day to American Marketing Association and the Next Gen committee that we were forming, he actually became the community manager of Workbox here in Dallas. So they're based out of Chicago. They have locations in Pittsburgh, Chicago, Dallas, I think about 7 different markets, and they function a little bit differently than we work in that they just participate in a rev share split. So they don't actually take on the burden of the full lease and then kind of subletting it out. They just come in to the landlord and say, we'll put a marketing shell on this and then rev share split whatever we're able to lease out. So he became community manager of that entity here, and it's next door to my apartment here in downtown Dallas. And so he had just told me one day, come over and grab your fob. And I'm thinking, okay, what does that mean? And it wasn't until later that night, after he'd given me the fob, that it dawned on me. You just gave me access to like this amazing co-working space with all these amenities. And as Dallas Meetup continued to grow and our marketing prowess our platform became larger, I was in talks with the CMO of Workbox, and they were doing their own community events and promotion. And I said, this is the type of thing that we could really just skyrocket for you if you were to give us like a physical home and hearth office, really just for us to store things like our collateral, signage, but it's also served as an amazing home and hearth to kind of give back to the internal team and give us the ability to get together with not having people come over to my apartment, obviously.
Not entirely an awful setup. It's I love that you've you've kind of found so much intangible value in building this. And of course, we're gonna get really deep into what you've built, but it's cool to see that so much of the value that you get in the give and get model of yours is so intangible, and you didn't really sign up for that, but it comes with the value that you're adding to people's lives.
It makes life worth living, right? Just the little joys of camaraderie, making friends, like that gleefulness when you get together and you're like, can you believe that we pulled this off and that we're getting to do this thing now? We had that
Hmm.
moment when we did our second meetup in August of last year, and we had recruited an executive organizer named Jasmine Ammo to the team. And she worked for the Economic Development Corporation of Arlington, where all of the Dallas Fort Worth sports teams are kind of, their stadiums are over there, like the Rangers and the Cowboys principally. And so they had a box suite to the Rangers, and she said, bring the whole team. So we got to go out there and we were just gleeful, because growing up sports fans, there's nothing better than box seats and premium parking. Premium parking was actually probably the best part of that. So it's just those little things where you're kind of incredulous looking around, like, I can't believe that we came together and did this and became better friends in the process.
Yeah, that is a pretty magical experience. I want to set some context here just so that like the viewers know who we're talking to. You've had a pretty interesting journey going from a YC founder to working in corporate, and now you run the largest networking mixer in Dallas. Uh, But I want you to take us a little bit through that journey, and I really really want to dive into how you've kind of navigated three very, very different swim lanes of your life.
I've been working on tying all of the swim lanes together with a cohesive thread, Rohan. So hopefully all the iterations on this will make sense. But I think that Dallas Meetup is the culmination of everything that I've done in my career. My entire scholastic education, upbringing in Dallas, my interests, coming from radio, TV, film, journalism, like public relations and advertising school in college. I kind of was in that Mad Men era. You know, Mad Men had come out on AMC. I was an intern on the American Airlines account in downtown Dallas my junior, senior year of college for the 8th largest agency in DFW at the time. And that was my dream, to go, you know, be a big ad man in downtown Dallas. And it didn't quite work out that way after school. That agency was shrinking. They didn't have placement for me. And I ended up in a digital media agency directly following school, and got involved in their sales process, and ended up going into more of a sales driven role, always surrounding that media, Marcom, PR, agency type environment. But that sales job kind of seeded the foundation for Dallas Meetup in some ways, in that back in 2012, I attended 55 networking events my first full year out of school. And I just gated around to see who I should go deeper with. And back in the 20 teens, that was American Marketing Association, the Dallas Fort Worth chapter. It was the 5th largest chapter of about 80 international chapters. We had 1,200 members, and they were all of the big corporate HQs here in Dallas and Plano, all of their big CMOs and marketing, digital, technology. So it was really a formidable group, and I really cut my teeth there starting at age 23, I believe. Ended up serving on that board for 4 years. I started their YP chapter, AMA Next Gen. It was my first brand that I ever named, as a kind of a sub brand, if you will, and recruited a team, a successor. And that was really my first foray into like not-for-profit leadership management of kind of a fiduciary board team. I ended up having to depart AMA because my first startup was seeded by Y Combinator, and we were moving to San Francisco to split some time. So we had apartments in Dallas and San Francisco. So while AMA was going on, in the corporate or the 9 to 5 background, I finally landed at my favorite boutique branding agency in Dallas. It was called the Brand Hatchery. We did the most innovative, fun stuff, from logo and identity palettes, mood boards, brand naming. I think one of the most comprehensive stories from that time period of my life was the story of Story Modern, spelled STORI space modern. It's a outdoor direct-to-consumer furniture company started by the founder of the largest outdoor wrought iron furniture company in America. So she's big over in North Carolina, big designer, and she has all of the wrought iron furniture that adorns the White House and its exteriors, for instance. So this is a big production, even though it's kind of a niche thing for this podcast, probably. She wanted to go direct to consumer, and she had a big war chest to do so, and loved coming into our boutique studio. She loved our creative director and our accounts team that I ran. And what we ended up getting to do was name her brand, logo and identity, mood board, all the different options for the directions that we could go. We ended up calling it Story Modern, and we came up with every collection being an adaptation of a well-known story. So what that resulted in was we did all of the logo and identity, the brand naming, we did the web design, and then when it came time to actually shoot the furniture for the thumbnails and e-com, we went to Miami and spent 400 grand in 3 days. And we shot the Jungle Book. We had Baloo. We had all of the characters from the Jungle Book in human form as an adaptation on the wrought iron furniture, outdoor furniture. And we were shooting this in the Everglades on location. So we did 5 different story adaptations. Charles Dickens, the Jungle Book. It was really innovative stuff, and it was a lot of fun. And now I see those ads for Story Modern across pre-roll, across, you know, my Instagram, my Facebook, And so that's a really cool, like 360 story of bringing brands to life that I got to participate in at an early age. The back-end developer at that agency and I ended up departing because we had founded cosmicjs.com, which was a headless content management platform that we were bringing to market, providing a WYSIWYG editor in the cloud for content creators to easily model content to send to any internet-connected application. We had built 30, 40 WordPress websites together in our time at the agency. This was 2014 to 16. So big brochureware days. Everybody was like, what does your web app look like? That was back in the day back before I think Squarespace and some of these D2C tooling became really sophisticated and proficient. That was back when people were still spending $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 on a website as a mid-tier company. So we had really reinvented the wheel every single time that we wanted a new digital instance for a client. And unbeknownst to me, for quite a while, he had been side projecting this and building up some beta users. And when it came time to incorporate and take it to market, we had worked together, me on the go-to-market side, him on the back end, technology side. So we incorporated and went off to the races. I feel like I should pause there because I'm dominating the conversation a bit.
Well, the podcast is all about you, so it's good. It's great to get some insights.
We went off on our go-to-market, which it's a really great technical project to be able to point back to for credibility with a lot of back-end folks, a lot of innovative kind of bleeding edge technologists. It was probably access to a product that I shouldn't have gotten in some ways, but we went off on the go-to-market, and it took probably 18 months for us to kind of get to that preliminary level of, okay, we've got 50 paying customers. We've got 10,000 in MRR. We've gotten some angel checks into the bank account. But this entire time, I was dwindling through my life savings that I had accumulated up until that point. I was not getting paid. We were at 5, 6, 7,000 MRR with two co-founders, and he had a family, a child on the way, a home and a mortgage. I was still more of the younger, non-technical, minority vesting co-founder. And so I dwindled through my entire life savings in this 18-month period and made the interesting decision to actually borrow 30 grand from my parents to continue the journey. And I just took it upon myself to try to thread the needle to get the company funded to the extent that we could pay ourselves to defray my own personal debt that I was taking on. And one of the scariest moments of my life was when I had spent half of what my parents gave me. And I thought, losing all of my own money is one thing, but going into the hole is a completely different thing. I think at that time of my life, it was also, and maybe rightfully so, but emasculating to a certain extent that I felt funded by mommy and daddy a little bit. I wanted to do for myself. And it's kind of a fun story looking back because we were able to thread the needle. We got some of the Stripe and OpenAI co-founding team members to write angel checks into the startup. And we had to do a lot of work to get into Y Combinator. That was kind of the claim to fame that I left that startup with, was having gone through the YC Winter 19 batch program. One of the funniest things that I was telling somebody I was networking with the other day is that everybody from Cornell, MIT, and Stanford basically jotted down some notes on a cocktail napkin and got in on their first try, it felt like. And then we were over here with, Greg Brockman was on our cap table. OpenAI president is on our cap table, and we can't get in. We had to have 10,000 MRR, referrals from all of these different seed investors that had gone through the program or come from companies that went through the program, and 2 applications to get in. But we did get in. We found out we were actually in Seattle at the time, pitching Big Fish Games as our first land and expand enterprise potential customer. So they had come on board because they were managing all of their game brands have landing pages that have to be hyper localized, retranslated. They really needed a nimble content management component to their stack. So they onboarded Cosmic.js and we were up there trying to expand that contract. And that was the night that we found out that we got into Y Combinator.
Exciting. Um, d During this period, right, when you spent half of the money that your parents had given you, going through your life savings, what is that drive that keeps you going on this path and not just find a stable job? Because, and I could be wrong, but generally people who get into Y Combinator, for example, or build something impactful themselves, they're very capable of getting a good, high-paying job, stable job, and not needing to take that risk at all. And so when something's just not working out and it's just getting worse and worse as time goes on, what keeps you there? Like, what is that faith? What is that belief?
It's not all faith and belief in some ways. Some of it can be a golden handcuff situation where let's be honest, you're vesting equity. You are Part of me was relieved to have gotten access to the product and being on the co-founding leadership team. Like it felt like that was destiny in some ways. And maybe that illustrates my crazy nature, but I did feel like I was meant for more than just pushing paper in a corporate environment, so to speak. And up until that point, I'd never worked in a large scaled out real corporate matrix enterprise organization. So you get partway into it and it's those little things that give you that return on energy, that one $10,000 investor check at a 2.75 mil, post money. It's just like that boat of faith that keeps you going for another 6 weeks. And then, the next investor comes in and that gets you another 6 weeks of runway emotionally and mentally and physically. Um, so I think it's a lot of different things that you get so far into that journey as well, and you start to feel a little bit like a journalist and or like a generalist rather, and like you're maybe not qualified for some of the tip of the spear jobs that people are really recruiting for in corporate America. Because once you've been a co-founder and kind of led partnerships, marketing, customer success, sales, you don't necessarily know which category you would fit in to make the most money and impact in corporate environments. It's like, do I polish off the sales end of my spear or the customer success, or am I an entrepreneur in residence? Like, you don't even know what you would revert to in many ways. And maybe this is the burden of like the non-technical co-founder role that I always played. And that's part of the reason why I'm so excited about what we're doing at Dallas Meetup, because it's the first time that I've ever been able to control sales and delivery. I've never been able to speculatively go out over my skis selling to an early stage subscription customer because I didn't know if the product could do that by next Tuesday. I didn't know if that was in keeping with how we felt about our product. The back end dev that I was working with had definitive ideas about what the world should look like and what a tool should look like for that world. So as the non-technical co-founder, you don't always know if you're remaining on brand guidelines with some of those feature requests, for instance. I don't
Take
know if
us,
that does justice to your
It does.
question,
yeah.
but
I mean, I want you to take us through the the journey of pitching to some of these folks and the potential like fears or apprehensions you have, or maybe the intimidation that you have going into a room and telling these guys to give you money. What does that look like?
in retrospect, I feel like it looked completely juvenile, likely. This was years ago at this point, and I really feel like working for the last startup CEO that I worked for, he was at times a trial and a tribulation, but I also feel as though he made me reach down deeper and become a professional man in some ways. Just look at things for how they are. And looking back on our time in YC and even prior, the angel checks are one thing. Those guys are kind of spraying and praying investment dollars at times. And, if you're within a space that I think at the time Contentful was the major player in the space that had gotten a Series B. And so anytime, a Pioneer gets a Series B, people are going to be looking in that space. What can I kind of spread some dollars over. Um, and as the non-technical co-founder that, I was vesting a minority schedule of the shares. I wasn't always involved with the fundraising components of the first startup. I do remember pitches that we went to in downtown San Francisco during our Y Combinator batch. And looking back, I feel like it was one of those, like, if we could just capture 1%, this total addressable market, this is the result. And just things that sophisticated investors likely don't want to hear. And due to some NDA protected interpersonal stuff, I also came to find out later that we weren't concertedly trying to raise capital during our time in Y Combinator. So I think that the time was spent in different ways. My co-founder always wanted that stamp of approval. He wanted that community. He wanted to experience that. He had a lot of respect for YC. And in many ways, having departed the company prior to like an IPO or an exit or kind of a closing chapter, having gone to Y Combinator has served me in a major way because I took that mantle with me, as well as the shares that I had vested up until that point.
What's the experience at YC like? What's that environment like?
It's alive.
Mm.
It's an exciting time. Um, the roster of companies that have gone through those doors are world changing. They're just absolutely world changing companies. And for those folks to then come back and you get to sit at their feet for the YC dinners, you go in once a week and you have your small group batch. So I can't speak to everyone's experience, but by 2019, they had expanded these cohorts or batches pretty considerably. I think that they had incorporated like a life sciences and biology category. There were people disrupting like the cannabis space in the batch that I was in. So it was a lot more scaled out. We were in kind of a dev tools subgroup of 10 that was under Solomon Hike of Docker, Adora Chung of Homejoy, and then Dalton Caldwell, who sold iMeme to MySpace. And so we were with 10 other founder groups and we would just get together in a circle. And as I recall, there was a script. Hi, I'm Carson Gibbons. I'm with Cosmic JS, the drop-in replacement for WordPress. And we were always trying to perfect that elevator pitch and pitch it in different contexts. Then we would immediately lean into the problem. So we would list metrics from the last week. Hey, we're growing 10% signups week over week or revenue, whatever. And this is our biggest problem. And then everybody would go around the room and then we would just start to dissect one another's problems. After that, you would go into the main hall and we had some of the best founder dinners ever. We had Patrick and John Collison of Stripe that came and talked about the journey. We had the co-founders of Cruise that came, GM's, I think it was GM's like automated or self-driving car division. They exited for several $billion. We got to learn their entire journey. The Brex co-founders, the startup credit card, they really won the batch in a lot of ways because those guys came to the dinner and come to find out at 16 years old growing up in, I think it was Brazil, they just wanted to go to Stanford. They were just talented kids that wanted to go to Stanford. So they set up some sort of payment gateway or billing system. Forgive me for butchering this history, but they set it up and it transacted $1 billion in transactions when these kids were 16, 17, 18. And it served as like a great case study or essay for them to actually get into Stanford. When they did, they dropped out to go to YC with like a completely different concept. I believe that they entered the batch with some sort of VR idea, something like that. And then they quickly shelved it, pivoted, and went into credit cards for startups.
Yep.
One of the most fun things about their story was, and I really identified with this in some ways, not fully understanding the difference that the product that I was representing was trying to make in the world. They were doing things guerrilla old school style. When they raised their seed round, they went out and bought all the out of home in San Francisco and at SFO Airport. They thought to themselves, this is the biggest concentration of startups that need, banking services, that need credit cards, that need lines of credit. So let's just set it up here. And that produced dividends for them and it branded them in a major way. Another thing that they did was they had one of the co-founders, Enrique, had this beautiful home in Mission Hills in San Francisco, and he would host parties for every batch where you would show up and start walking up. It's like a 4-story home in the hills there, and at the bottom is your name on like a lanyard or a magnet that's Brex branded. So everything is branded, but everything was wearable, and the time to trash was long because it was kind of a commemorative item of sorts. And they had hors d'oeuvres and cocktail people, rolling around. And it was one of the most fun parties that you'll never forget. And you always will want to do business with Brett's because they create those community vibes. They were just a lot of fun.
I think it's it's Brex in particular has a great business model because they've taken what was traditionally very boring in B2B and they've made the feel a very consumer first brand with their storytelling, with their branding now. I had a cousin that worked there for a
Really?
long time, and I remember when they got Series D at a $7.4 billion valuation. That's when they really came in and kind of like tore the market apart a little bit. Today you see Ramp and a couple other players coming in, but I think fundamentally Brex has a storytelling that just really worked in their favor for the space they were in. So yeah, I
It
mean,
was just a cut above. They
yeah.
they thought of because I'll never forget that party and walking in and seeing all the branded wearables and things that again, time to trash, triple T. They found a way. I think that was in my backpack for years after that, and it's probably in a drawer now. And I'll never forget the story. But that's a representation of what YC is like. It's almost imposter syndrome for someone like myself, in that I wasn't a coder, I wasn't a technologist, and you have folks like Enrique walking around who's like, oh, I transacted $1 billion on a platform that we shelved because we got into Stanford, and then we dropped out of Stanford to do this, and now we're billionaires. That's the level and caliber of talent and optionality. I'll never forget talking to a student whose father was upset with him for dropping out of Cornell for the semester to see if Y Combinator and his startup could have a shot at it. The level of optionality is just supreme there.
Good talent never has a dearth of opportunities. It's interesting. I guess that's why, like, to answer the earlier question that I asked you, why, even though, you go through hard times while creating something impactful, at some level it's just fun. Like, you're looking for that rush that it gives you. And there's something exciting about that.
I'm starting to think that there's really almost, and this might be an oversimplification, but two types of people in life, and you either have a fire in your belly or you
Mm.
don't. And the people that do, that are in corporate today, they know it, that they're personally convicted that they are underperforming themselves in the world. Frankly, I was recently in a corporate environment and knew that I was failing myself in some ways, especially with the formation of Dallas Meetup as almost a side hustle that's taken center stage in my life. You get that rush of leadership energy, and you start to act more true to self and operate in your unique operating capability lane. And you have to be true to self as far as that goes. I had a conversation with a guy this week actually who is probably one of the most talented. I don't even know what you would call him. He's like a CISO, like COO, CTO combination, in that he's the business backbone MBA that can also code the Slack integration, use AI to do X, Y, and Z, and report it all back in a way that gets the team on board. Like, he's a jack of all trades. He was at my last startup and went to work similar to me. Once that startup kind of no longer became a viable option for many of the team members vesting good equity, we split up and went to various consulting firms, and he ended up at a boutique one in Dallas. And they recently were acquired, and they're losing kind of their own cultural DNA a little bit and some of the things that were making them them. And it's great money. He's staffed on a project that really doesn't require much of him. So he gets to watch documentaries a lot of the day and collect several $100,000 a year. And he knows that he's wrong. He knows it. He came over to the office and he's like, this isn't it. I'm meant for more. And I think that there are those people.
It's such a beautiful thing you said there, because I was sitting with a friend yesterday and she showed me this TikTok video where this 23-year-old graduated college, and this is more metaphorical. He was placed on the street in this one square box, and his manager said, I just want you to stand here from 9 to 5 and I'll pay you this much money. And so he did that, and he kept doing that. And his manager comes to him 2 years later. I think I'm wrong. His manager comes to him 2 years later. He's like, you're so loyal, you're getting promoted. Takes him a couple steps forward and puts him in a bigger box. And the same thing happens. And the metaphor here is that everyone around him was living their lives, and they were going skateboarding, and he loved skateboarding, and they were going cycling and doing whatever, and he was just confined to these four walls, right? And he went through his entire life, and he retired, and he tried skateboarding, and he couldn't because he was old and, well, frail. It's interesting that you can put yourself in environments where you're failing yourself because you know what you're capable of. And it just goes to show that sometimes the comfort of being in those four walls keeps you there for too long. And before you know it, I mean, you're far too deep into that.
That's how we are as people, as a species in many ways. I think that's probably the preset configuration, and maybe the folks with the fire in their belly are. You have to be a bit of a contrarian and almost frustrated with the system to go out and try to create a better way. And then looking back, you're almost amazed that, oh, I could have just done that, but I needed to accrue all the context and knowledge and pain points to get to that point. And so much of education and media and the way corporate America works is we're looking for someone to give us the nod. We're looking for someone else's opinion on our year in review, for our year in bonus, if we get that promotion. And sometimes it can be arbitrary.
Do you think that a lot of that happens today because people are unafraid to take a bet on themselves and would rather someone else take a bet on them?
Will you restate the question? So I'd rather have somebody else take the burden of responsibility in case this doesn't work out.
No, even more so is like sometimes when you don't have that innate hunger or belief to take a bet on yourself, but you know that you're being reinforced because someone else is taking a bet on you, so you're okay being where you are.
Lack of self-confidence.
I think
Somewhat.
even the folks with a fire in their belly have those moments where they make those decisions because I'm one of them. There have been moments, namely leaving the last Series A funded startup. I had been in this mode for the last 7 years of taking sub-market base pay in exchange for stock options that I was vesting and I could purchase in the future if I wanted to. And one of the most interesting moments of my life was actually being the number one person on the last cap table. I was vesting the biggest amount of equity outside of the CEO at my last startup. And I didn't know that for several years of my employment. And I was finally taken aside by a leadership person and told, you know that you have the largest chunk that you're vesting. And more so than the president of the company, who had been there a year prior to me, I ended up departing that company, not buying a single one of them because I didn't think that they would be worth anything. I thought that they would already be underwater, and I didn't believe in the viable future of the company. They had pivoted away from a product that I'd built from 0 to 25,000 MRR, and there was no end in sight for the new product that they were bringing to market. And that my dad was big in my ear during that point of my life, talking to me about opportunity cost, just sunken opportunity cost, and like you don't have to make sense of the last 3 years of your life by purchasing these options. He's like, they could just be what they are, worthless. And you walk away and you have the experience. Once you've had 7 consecutive years of 1099ing yourself or making just far less than you should, and of course, no OTE on the sales side either, because you're never hitting some of those early stage metrics that you're setting out for. You're looking for a parachute. And I found that in a corporate position that had been trying to recruit me for several years during my startup time. They felt like maybe I could speak to the more technical digital marketing side of kind of that consulting advisory dev process. And when it became clear that the startup that I was at had no merit moving forward, I contacted that person and said, maybe it is time to talk ball. And they came through with frankly, the base salary offer that they gave me was 50% more than I had ever made in a base salary up until that point in my life. So it was a substantial, the first year of employment there, I made 200% what I had ever made in a fiscal year up until that point. So I was just, I was really excited about that and deploying that against other diversified interests. Like I put all my eggs in one basket at a time. I'm going all in. That's one thing that, for better or worse, I'm very futuristic. And when I go all in, I can't walk and chew bubble gum. I've just got to go towards that North Star metric. So for 3 years of my life, 4 years of my life, it was Cosmic JS. For the next 3 years, it was Appreciate, now a company called Scoot. And then I started to think, I need to have land. I need to have, mineral rights. I need mailbox money. I can't just rely on trying to strike it big in a jackpot lottery situation with a software as a service startup. So few of those make it into the Zucks or whoever. So I knew I needed to diversify, and I spent the last several years doing that. And it actually afforded me the opportunity to side project and beta test the product that I'm now bringing to market.
Interesting. That's a that is a beautiful story, and I think it perfectly ties into talking a little bit more about what you're building right now. You seem to have had the founder mentality. You've spent time with enough startups. You made a relatively long foray into corporate before now, of course, like going all in on Dallas Meetup. Take us through a little bit of where the thought process behind Dallas Meetup started and what the bigger mission and vision is there.
Dallas Meetup was really born kind of out of the discontent with the traditional fiduciary board agency relationship within a nonprofit 501c3 environment that are largely responsible for our networking opportunities in the markets that we live in. American Marketing Association was a not-for-profit organization, an NGO. When I came back from Y Combinator with the job at Appreciate, I felt kind of like I was on an island and I didn't know other founders. I didn't know if there were other YC people in town. So I joined the DEC network, the Dallas Entrepreneur Center, which for probably a decade plus was like the central source for all things kind of angel, startup, VC related in town. And I very quickly assumed the chairman role of their associate board and recruited about 40 YPs that put on quarterly mixers that kind of served as top of funnel awareness for mentors, mentees, sponsors, interested startups that wanted to take advantage of the DEC network's resources. During my time there, I learned a lot. I was frustrated with the lack of support from the junior staff at the agency that we would often deal with. It felt like we were at the little kid table, but then whenever we would need to actually work with the agency, it was somebody who had been in their career for 6 months and didn't know what they were doing compared to the executives I was working with on the pro bono side. And they had 6 weeks of burn at any given time, which they claimed was pretty decent for a not-for-profit like theirs. During the pandemic, they diversified the legs of their revenue stool. And once I actually took a look at the budget, everything started to make a little bit more sense. They started to write grant checks to underprivileged founders in startup deserts that didn't have access to capital and resources. And that is a beautiful mission. But some of the more merit-based startups that were competing on a national or international level weren't getting the same eyes, I guess. They weren't getting the same attention. And networking in kind of a white collar aspirational way was no longer their product market fit. And I can't blame them for that. They were going where the money was. Post pandemic, I think globally it was an issue where you're only as good as the leadership team that you were brought back with. And if you don't have strong, capable executives running your networking mixers or your programming, your chapter is likely to have failed or regressed since the pandemic. And so when I was rolling off of the Deck Network board about a year ago, I started to date different associations and organizations to see who I wanted to go deeper with, similar to what I had done back in 2012 when I identified AMA. And every single one of them was really kind of giving me the runaround in some ways. They were really preoccupied with what I looked like, who I loved, or a very niche skill set in a particular vertical. And then and only then would that qualify me to attend their non-member happy hour for the nominal fee of $25 with no exposed value as to like who's going to be there, who's on your team. Are these gainfully employed executives that I could benefit from networking from a SME perspective or a lead gen perspective? Or is this going to be a bunch of unemployed independent consultants, so to speak? And it felt like that was just across the landscape. Everywhere I was looking, a lot of DEI initiatives were still cutting off total addressable market and otherwise good people that could add to everyone's bottom line. And I thought that that was interesting. So DallasMeetup.com was available. I had a bunch of folks from the board that I'd just been serving on that frankly were interested in following me regardless of the mantle or cloak I was wearing in some ways. And I pitched them all on, we know we want to continue our relationships and friendships. We know we want to continue networking. Let's take one night out of every 90 to get together and throw a brand over it. One of the things that we were able to do is we were able to retain the people that are otherwise leaving the not-for-profit space. So the 35 to 37-year-olds that are done paying dues to go work on a not-for-profit board, and their career has scaled to the point that they're not looking for those networking opportunities as much anymore. They have high-stakes meetings that they can't necessarily get out of to go decide how they're going to give back with the golf fundraiser that particular afternoon. They're having 2.5 kids and a white picket fence. A lot of them were departing the last organization that I was with, and I was able to retain their civic involvement, and they kind of lent me their likeness because the barrier to entry was lower, the commitment was lower, and we were going to bring Dallas Meetup to market as a quarterly mixer that billed itself as a Big Ten industry agnostic networking mixer for laptop professionals. That's a little bit of kind of the pain point that went into it. But again, I tie that narrative going back to my first year out of school, that 4 years on the American Marketing Association board, and then multiple years with the Deck Network, and having gone through some of the frustration and some of my own maturation and patience learning to actually identify and get to the bottom of what's wrong with this relationship and why are we incapable of hosting the networking component. I wasn't aware of all the tertiary items that were going on where that networking component may or may not have anything to do with their product market fit and how they're actually paying their bills as an NGO.
It's a nuanced idea. And I feel like also just figuring out what opportunity you had in the market to make Dallas Meetup successful it's
Is
not
accidental.
in a sense, right?
It is. No, we're the first ones to confess that we're surprised. This was never, I never started Dallas Meetup thinking this could become, I'm sitting in the Dallas Meetup offices in downtown Dallas right now. I always claimed we'll never have a brick and mortar location. Like, we are a low barrier to entry, like low committal networking event that, hey, if you make it, great. If you don't, we'll see you next time. I really kind of thought it would be the proverbial neighborhood, 150, 200 friends getting together and kind of sharing some leads, catching up quarterly. what it's become has completely blown my mind. And it's one of my favorite things about this go to market. I've been in three. So the first two, we went 0 to 25,000 MRR, YC, big logos, land and expand. Both of those companies continue on to this day, which I think is cool to be able to point to as an early stage kind of co-founder or employee. But I've never felt product market fit until Dallas Meetup. I've never felt what YC described. Michael Seibel, the outgoing president of YC, um, maybe he's not the outgoing president. I think Gary Tan is, but he's been affiliated, and I think he's stepping back right now. But he was one of the Justin TV co-founders that became Twitch. So Michael Seibel describes product market fit as laying awake in bed at night, concerned about how you're going to fulfill the next day's onslaught of orders. And until you're there, until you're stressed about how to keep up with the demand, you don't have product market fit. So I've never actually had it until this moment where we started to put it out there. We really put forth an aspirational brand that led with the faces and logos of those who were in attendance. So I'm reading a book right now, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And it's interesting because this sounds self-congratulatory, but in retrospect, we were always on the SB7 framework of making the networker the hero and Dallas Meetup the guide. You are always the hero, and you're faced with the dilemma of wanting leads, community, and status, and you don't know where to go find them per se. And then we introduced DallasMeetup.com as the guide to just simply insert your email address, come for free, and attain the leads, community, and status that you're looking for. That is the whole name of the game. And while it's been a happy surprise, in some ways I always knew that this could accrue value as a media outlet for a future acquirer. That was always kind of in the back of my mind. And I took all that branding, go-to-market experience from my agency and startup days and really focused in on the nerdy stuff initially. Most people would just be interested in the event, but I was all about the SEO and the backlinks and trying to make sure that not only did we get on the news to promote the event, but we got that backlink. That backlink was the most important thing. The backlink from medium.com, from WFAA.com, from the different partnerships that we were doing. It was always a growth hacking content marketing machine in my mind. And to this day, I think that Dallas Meetup is largely a content marketing biz dev firm that has an experiential layer quarterly. But we have the reach of a publication because of the way that we showcase the people that will be in the room ahead of time. We have the reach of a publication, but the precision of a new business partnerships team, because we have large scale networking mixers. Rohan has been to one that we hosted in November with 1,000 plus folks in attendance and can attest to the fact that there might be 1,000 folks milling around the room or wherever we're meeting, but we have a cohort of about 35 incumbent VIPs and emerging leaders in a different industry segment that we illuminate in the Big Tent quarterly. So we've done that for economic development corporations. That was our first kind of foray into what would become the content marketing schema for Dallas Meetup and would comprise a lot of the content and virality that we've experienced over the last 9 months. We really utilize LinkedIn's point of sale. They give you 16 featured speaker slots to populate the first detail page of your LinkedIn event. DallasMeetup.com was not backed by an altruistic mission or purpose or 501c3 backing. And I had the short man syndrome and the insecurity of why would anybody come to this? 24 hours before I published the first event, I'm like, I'm crazy. Why would anybody come? I thought that maybe by seeding that first page, folks would be more likely to come from various geos that they saw their economic development corporation from their city represented. We ended up getting 40 economic development corporations from all over North Texas and even into Southern Oklahoma to attend. And what that resulted in was a 73% show up rate on free ticket signups with 650 attendees in the room. That was our second event, the largest event I'd ever solo quarterback hosted. And it was at that moment that we knew we're on to something. Like there was something here. We felt the FOMO that we had generated, almost like it was a more exclusive, like red carpet or ticketed gala, but it was just a neighborhood happy hour.
When it comes to such big events, 1,000 people, 650 people, when I'm coming in as an individual, I want to get some value out of it. Now there are, let's say, 999 other people. Not every one of them. I won't have a meaningful interaction or a valuable conversation with each and every one of them, and so it can be daunting to go through, navigate my way through the entire event, all of those different people, different conversations, to find what I'm looking for and get what I'm looking for in a sense. And of course, give back to the other people who are there as well. And so when it comes to meetings that big, like how do you help people attending navigate that? How do you organize such an event where people act like there is a high success rate in the people who are coming in, leaving with what they came for?
You said give back, which is almost past tense or like something has already happened that's beneficial for me. We give to get. So giving is the first ingredient.
Okay.
We don't cater to some of the folks that come that are dead set on one item or one connection or selling one product. They're welcome to come. Their experiences may vary. It's really for the people that are looking to give to get and looking to build their networks over time. They're going to build their pipeline. They're going to sell deals. They're going to identify like-minded folks. But Dallas Meetup is a bit more long-term and intentional in its horizon as far as that goes. So, and we're contrarian as well. We've gotten a lot of requests from people that are like, could we have better wayfinding and signage to identify industry? And I'm thinking, sure, which industries should those be? And then if I'm in real estate, if I'm selling homes or even office space, does it matter what industry you're in? I think dentists, barbers, insurance, tax firms, they all need corporate space. They all need homes. Like I didn't understand some of that. We got a lot of requests for color coded name tags. That's been the biggest request that's driven me up the wall. And I've gotten it from my own team and it makes sense. I actually attended a nationally franchised networking group called Network After Work that would go rent out clubs, and they were kind of the new hot thing in town. And they did the color coded name badges. So if you were in architecture, it was red. If you were in tax, it was purple. Guess what? By your second drink token, nobody remembered what any of the colors meant, and it became exactly what it was, a free for all dating frenzy. It's community, it's church, it's lead gen, it's whatever you're looking for. So just like your algorithm is a reflection of what your interests are and your deep-seated fears or desires, you need to look within if you're having a bad experience and maybe create better for others around you because it's a reflection of you. Our common refrain or rebuttal to the color-coded name tag theory is if you can't clearly and quickly articulate your elevator pitch in a way that gives value to others and deduces whether or not they're a good prospect for you to continue a conversation with, that's okay. Keep coming back. You'll get better. We're the most inclusive, non-hand-holding group ever because no one did for us. We actually had, this whole group is born out of our discontent with the available products in the market. So in some ways, we always build, measure, learn, but we're doing that for us as our first demographic and audience and ideal customer profile. We're trying to build what we wanted to see in the world and wasn't available. And I almost succumbed to the color-coded name tags event 3, and I stood my ground. And I've been glad that I've done so since because it reinforces positive behavior, open networking body language. These events get so large that you need to learn how to network in the line to get in the line to get a drink, in the line to use the restroom. It's all of those are great environments where you need to be accustomed to giving your elevator pitch and also being sociable and socially couth in that moment.
I want to use this opportunity, honestly, to zoom out a little bit on networking as an art and as a concept. You I think you framed it perfectly where everyone's gonna come with their own purpose, right? O- Oftentimes, most of the times, for people who aren't used to networking per se, they consider it a transaction. It's kind of I'm coming in here with the hope that I can get something from someone. It's very transactional. How do you deviate from that and actually have a a lack of mission oriented networking event where you're just going to make friends, build new relationships, and like you said, network in the line for drinks or in the line to the bathroom? What are those small things that people can do when it comes to networking where it doesn't quite feel transactional?
Just to add on to that a little bit, so let's say a scenario where you're an entrepreneur, you just started your own company, maybe you're looking to hire some people, maybe you're looking for funding, whatever comes with that kind of a role and that kind of responsibility. You go to a networking event. How do you navigate it? What do you do? What are your tricks to get the most out of it?
Those are two very different questions in some ways, and kind of reinforcing best behaviors or things to not do in some ways. Rohan, to your point about being transactional, in some ways, I don't know if I'm the best person to ask from a best practices perspective on getting better with that, because so much of my experience has been just getting older and getting more context and maturing and seeing, oh, like sometimes the all the pieces add up into what you're seeing now, and I make sense of it after the fact, and I'll actually maybe write the story backwards. So in some ways, this is just my own maturation in market, getting more context and seeing, oh, that person that I wasn't going to get anything from initially that ended up kind of being a friend, and then we ended up benefiting each other later in life. That's what this is all about. Now I see that. At the same time, it's such a double-edged sword, because what I just said is a cautionary tale. That friend, like, you don't, you want to be, it's both ends of the spectrum where you have to be very discerning and very kind at the same time, because you don't want to go to stale networking rooms where it's just a bunch of your friends on a monthly basis and you're drinking. It's not really productive. You're not actually furthering your network. So we exist on we exist in a paranoid state between both of these polar opposites, where there are professional networkers who post on LinkedIn a new selfie at a new bar with a new group of architecture, construction based professionals every single day of the week. I don't think that that's healthy or productive. When are you doing your subject matter expert work? When are you actually pushing the paper that fulfills the product that you sell or that you're bringing to market? If you're always at a rubber chicken dinner or a networking happy hour, I have questions about that.
Uh, there's a couple of layers to this, right? When it comes to just networking as a concept, I truly think it is an art, and I've been fortunate enough to kind of see my mother do it growing up, my father as well. But my mother is tremendous, and I think the one thing that she's always taught me is always focus on what value you can add to someone else's life, right? Like what can you, like you said, what can you give? Don't go there with an intention to take, because no one's gonna give you anything if you go with an intention to take. I want
You
to tie
can
this. Go for it.
Giving is taking. Giving feels good when done right. And when you actually add value, one of the best moments, one of the most euphoric moments of my life is when I nail a referral. When that person calls you after they run a discovery call with somebody that you sent their way, and they're like, they can benefit from us in X, Y, and Z. And then they call you 90 days later and they're like, look at the case study. They just renewed. They're actually on the website as a pull quote testimonial. Nothing feels better than that. And everybody is always trying to formalize referral agreements. And no. because I'm not going to be loyal to you if you're not doing great work, if it doesn't make sense for both of you parties in the moment. And but nailing those alley oops, the assist is so much fun. I'm sure you saw the NBA pass. Was it Jokic this week, that the no look pass behind the
Oh
back
yeah,
that broke
yeah,
the internet? That's sometimes better than scoring, right?
I like that analogy.
yeah.
And what I would challenge you, it depends on the section of your career that you're in. And Dallas Meetup is cross generational in terms of the audiences that we cater to. If you're in that 20 something, 30 something demographic, you're still in the take crap and say thank you phase of your life because you're still learning and you don't have the full context for things. So my recommendation is host the event, get on the organizing team, sponsor, give sweat equity, give away your labor, volunteer, get affiliated, and start to learn. We feature those incumbent VIPs from each industry as featured networkers, where we are there to like hold their hands and give them flowers and send them home with the data. And they're giving us a different perspective. They're giving us something to aspire to. So all of their networks are going to come out and support them and provide infrastructure for those 20 and 30 somethings that are just cutting their teeth, making their mistakes to actually look up to. So you have to have all of those things spinning, so to speak. And I think that if you view networking in your 20s and 30s as putting an entire cohort of people into owing mode, how many people could owe you favors when you're 38, when you're 42? How many people could you have sent leads to for the last 10 years? Or you've built a long tail book of business that you've done right by. They're renewing, their testimonials, their word of mouth for you. Those are we're the type of networking group that wants to see you prosper long term with whatever hat you're wearing. And I think that we've all had enough jobs at this point to recognize that every startup I was with before, I would call my parents and say, this is my last job. This is the last job that I will have. I've since abandoned that um, false premise or North Star horizon, because you always want to continue to work and be sharp and add value. And we're always going to continue to do so, regardless of the hat that we're wearing. So be good people, be good helpers and stewards in that networking environment first.
How can Gen Z learn to do more in real life networking when they're so comfortable just building digital communities and frankly don't quite have the social appetite or desire to go out and meet new people?
I think everyone is created different, and you're going to have introverts and extroverts. We just recruited our first 22-year-old fresh grad to our organizing committee. And she and I had a conversation where she has context at a stage of her career in life that I just didn't have. I think part of that is being a woman versus a man. Like many times our female counterparts just mature more fast than we do, more on a more rapid scale, know what they want in life earlier than us guys do in some ways. But she actually represents that Gen Z or younger generation that I said, this is a gap in a representing team. We need to have people click through and be able to see themselves in what we're offering so that they feel confident and comfortable attending. I think that it's mainly about democratization of access for them. Many of them, yes, maybe they feel more comfortable behind the keys of a keyboard or an iPhone, but many of them are looking for opportunities and they've never physically had them. If you graduated college 2019 or after, odds are is that you were never onboarded into a full 40-hour a week on campus job where they took you to lunch your first day. They took you to a networking happy hour or a team happy hour your first day to say, welcome to the team. Odds are you've never been to a large scale networking event, because we forget that the world shuttered for 2 years essentially. And it was hard for for-profit entities to force their employees back with any type of regular routine or cadence. So what happened with the not-for-profit space? Now they're straddled across a Google Drive and some anecdotal knowledge transfer from an outgoing president prior to the pandemic, and you weren't able to actually run any of the physical product that you offer in that time span. Like the thing that you do, events for advertising people or events for construction professionals, you couldn't do that. And there was no through line of continuity of management during that time. It was decimated. So many of them, it's just getting the URL in front of them, making sure that it's viral and that we're represented on all social media, and then that they know that it's a free option for them. So whether they're in the most blessed state and they just don't want to fiddle with Workday and putting in a $15 menial expense report, or on the flip side, they have no money, they're rationing money, and they're looking for that first job. Either way, they have no excuse. They can both be in the same room.
That's beautiful.
We also offer the rising tide that lifts all ships. Many folks that want to get more involved, they want to be more intentional, throw it out on LinkedIn and your social media that you're attending this event ahead of time. Many times in our rooms that are large, we see people that are branding themselves with a particular jacket. Maybe they're photographing the outfit that they're actually going to network in later that day and saying, I'll be in this portion of the bar, come find me. There's a lot of that intentionality. And forgive me, I just lost my train of thought on where I was going with that.
No, I think that the key theme there is that people need to be more intentional and just be more open, right? And that'll yield dividends for you no matter what.
Even though we promote certain people as featured and then other people are just attendees, once you're there, the experience is largely the same and it's an even playing field with agency. So no one's guaranteed to meet anyone. Anyone that steps in front of the step and repeat and wants to post about it on their LinkedIn after the fact, Dallas Meetup admin is going to re-amplify those posts, whether you're a CEO or a first-time job seeker, because it shows breadth and depth and life more than anything. It shows the networker is hero. They are the subject of this story.
That is absolutely beautiful. I think just to close out here, we're particularly curious with your relatively interesting journey through everything you've done. What kind of advice you would have for people who are in their 20s now?
I think the advice that I have is for folks that are, it's for me in my 20s. So maybe it's just personality types like me, but just to enjoy the journey. It's never your last job. You're always going to, you never want to get dull. You never want to atrophy. So the idea that you're going to quit one day with this big pile of money, that's a dream and you wouldn't be happy or fulfilled. You would just have time to do what you really want to do in life. So I feel like over the last several years, uh, again, some of the maturation of my own life, just enjoy the experience, appreciate what's occurring in the moment. And one of the things that I wish I had known is it's okay to sleep on it. Many times in our first roles, and especially in mine out of school, where it's sales, it's transactional, it's often inbound sales and whack-a-mole, get it into the CRM as quick as possible. You're trained that an email is an email reply better be quick versus true or thoughtful or measured. And the last CEO that I worked for really impressed upon me that you have one email burn to an executive and it better come with some value add. And it's okay to sleep on it. If I'm initially angered by something that happens in a work environment, maybe something else is going on. I spent much of the last year of my tenure with the last not-for-profit organization angry. And there was so many tertiary layers of knowledge and understanding that I was trying to get to that I just started to take a deep breath, maybe meditate a little bit more and try to figure out what am I missing here? And how is this person likely defending their fiefdom in a way that their downline and their management would be happy about? And this is simply an incongruence of incentive structures. So much of the miscommunication and frustration and lack of forward progress for both enterprises and in our own careers is not seeing the forest through the trees, not seeing what's actually in front of you in so many ways. It's looking at something and ascribing personal animosity or motive to something that you could API, assume positive intent. If I could tell myself anything, it would be API.
Positive intent. That's such a great message. We want to leave you with that. Just keep assuming positive intent API. Be intentional, be open. Follow Dallas Meetup and Carson on LinkedIn and everywhere else you find him. He's a professional one-liner. He is a great human being. And if you're ever in Dallas, make sure to attend a Dallas Meetup. Thank you so much, Carson, for joining us today. We really appreciate it.